Okay. All right. So I've got us at about 2 o'clock here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for coming. And I mean, it's right after lunch. I saw the grill had Philly cheesesteak and fries. That's what I had. And so clearly you are all ready for a nap because you had a big lunch and then you decided to come to a financial presentation. So, all right, I get it. If you're all fluffing your pillows and you nod over, I won't take it personally. I just know it's the time of day. So for those of you who don't know who I am or I haven't met you or anything about that, my name is Carter Smitherman. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at Royal Oaks. I've been here for about 10 years. Before that, I actually came from public accounting. I was doing audit and consulting services to government entities and nonprofits. And when I say I was doing audits of governments, I didn't audit for the government. I actually audited the government. So I would audit cities, towns, school districts, and things of that nature here locally in Arizona. And so I did that for a few years. And I did a small couple of years as the finance director at the Arizona Opera, which is obviously a nonprofit arts organization. And so every year I do a financial update. And I started this off a few years ago. I did it in the summer, and then there were quite a few people that are very busy in the summer, especially in Wisconsin and Minnesota, because they're not here. So I said, okay, I get it. Let's get out. You want to get away for the summer? I get it. I get away for the summer too. So then I moved it to September, and then this year it just slipped my mind a little bit. September filled up and it pushed into October, but around this time of year is around when I do a financial presentation. And what we're going to talk about today, I'll just go over the quick agenda here, is we're going to start off and we're going to talk about the foundation. So the foundation is a supporting organization for Royal Oaks, and I have Chuck Tholen here, the Director of Development, and he'll talk to you more about the foundation and the programs that it has. Then after that, we're going to go into a dive into the financial results of the prior year from Royal Oak's perspective, okay? And then from there, we're going to move over to everybody's favorite topic, inflation. Woohoo! Okay, my favorite topic, inflation. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about occupancy, a little bit of a new section for this year, but I do hear questions. And so I said, well, there's no reason that there might be a lot of people asking the same question. So I decided to put the presentation in here. Now, just housekeeping items. I know somebody's phone is ringing. It happens. If you want to take this time to maybe put your cell phones on mute, that's up to you. It's just polite from other people's point of view. But if you're expecting some sort of important call, I get it. If something happens and you have to take a call outside, go ahead and get up, go outside. It's not a problem. We're going to try to keep this between 2 and 3. The morning session actually ran about 15 minutes longer because people had a lot of questions, and I want to stay and answer your questions. So I will move through the material. I might move a little fast. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. I might do a couple stops to take questions. I have to keep an eye on the time, so sometimes I may stop questions and keep going, but there'll always be time for questions at the end. Okay. Handouts, we will have handouts at the end. So all these slides that you see up here, you don't have to take copious notes unless you want to. I'm not going to stop you. But if you want a copy of these, we will have a hard copy at the end of the presentation. So, all right. So with that all being said, I'd like to welcome Chuck up here to talk about the foundation.
Thanks, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this. I just want to kind of go over this. So, in that hour, this is 50 minutes. This is 10. So, and this is 2 minutes. So, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just want to talk about the foundation really quick for a minute. Our mission statement, as always, is we provide the benevolent care for any resident that's simply through no fault of their own actually outlives their resources. I mean, that's exactly what it's there for. We also do anything that enriches the lives of residents and or staff. So it's a very important part of the organization. Wanted to quickly show you our board of directors. These are our current board of directors. We have 4 resident board members. They are Janice Daniel, who's the president, Fred Yates, who's the vice president, Bruce Burnside, who's the current secretary, and Diana Gratinger, who just joined the foundation this last board meeting. The rest are all outside board members. So if you have a question about the foundation, you can either ask me, find me in the hallway, or stop one of the residents. So they'll be glad to answer anything. Couple of the groups that we support, if you happen to see the Get to Know Your Foundation meetings that were done in July, we covered a lot of this. But here's some of the small groups that we were supporting. It's not all of the groups, but we do support the library, the wood shop, toy makers, Tech Connect, Chapel, card making, art and music and memory gals, plus many, many other groups on site. So we do a lot of stuff, and Carter's going to go over a lot of the financials for it. Some recent foundation things that were completed. Like I said, we did the Get to Know Your Foundation meetings in July. We have another group coming up in February. So if you weren't able to attend or you have new questions that you'd like to go over or ask, feel free to set those up. Watch for your note on that. We also just recently completed our campaign for the wood shop. They now have a brand new CNC machine, which is, for those of you who are not into woodworking, it's a really fancy computer controlled router. And it will cut these toys for the toy makers in like half the time. And they're completely accurate. I mean, they are flying through toys now. But it helped other woodworkers that they wanted to do some of their own projects. So they have that ability as well. So thank you for everyone who donated. We really do appreciate it. We did hit the goal, and we're able to get that for the wood shop. Couple of things coming up. We currently have the Employee Appreciation Fund Drive going on right now. If you're going to attend one of the area meetings that's coming up, or you've already attended, the Employee Appreciation Fund Committee, a member will be there. They'll present about the fund and talk about it. It's very, very important, and we do appreciate it from a staff member. Thank you to everyone who donates to that. We are planning a donor thank you party at the end of January. So more information will be coming out on that. If you've donated to the foundation in the last couple of years, you'll be invited to that. It'll just be a nice, fun little thank you. We'll show some of the stuff we've done. That's all it is. It's really just a thank you party. And then our annual spring fundraiser will be coming up in March. That's our normal one that we do. If you attended the Roaring Twenties party last March, I got something really good planned for this one. So we're upping our game even more on this one, but look for some more information coming out on that. How to donate? Very, very easily. Cash, check, credit card. Always make your check out to the People of Faith Foundation. Not Royal Oaks, it's People of Faith Foundation. That is how it gets to our foundation. You can do a monthly charge on your statement. That's just automatic, just goes on there. You can do a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. You can do a charitable gift annuity, and we have some great rates for our charitable gift annuities right now. If you'd like to know more about that, please come see myself or Gail in accounting, and she would be more than happy to print out exactly what your payouts would be and everything else. And then you can always leave money to us in your will or trust. And we get a lot of money that way. That's really where most of the foundation dollars come from for the life of the foundation. So always good to do. And with that, any questions? All right. Well, I guess I'll turn it back to Carter now.
All
So
right.
he can
Thank
do
you.
the fun stuff.
You bet. All right. So, like I said, thank you, Chuck. He was mostly talking about the programs and how to give. There will be a slight section where we'll touch on the financials of the foundation, but the bulk of this presentation is going to be on the financials of Royal Oaks. So before I begin, for those of you that get a copy of the audited financial statements, you'll notice that it says it's a consolidated financial statements because there's actually three entities included in there: Royal Oaks, the foundation, and Cactus Sky. So when you start looking at the financials, all of those entities, all those companies are combined into one presentation. However, in the back of the audited financial statements, there's what's called the combining statements, and you can see each entity broken out on its own. They'll be in like little columns, a column for the corporation, the foundation, and Cactus Sky. So right now, these numbers are just going to be the corporation, Royal Oaks, okay? So I will move back and forth between the stage. I'm trying not to block the screen, but I'm also trying not to fall down the stairs. And so I'll try to keep shifting. I'm sorry if I'm in your way. Occasionally, I might have to lose weight. I don't know how to do that instantaneously. If you figured that out, let me know. But otherwise, I'll try to stay out of your way of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the balance sheet of Royal Oak. So let me explain what a balance sheet is. I know a lot of you have looked at balance sheets in your careers. For those that may not be familiar with it, a balance sheet is what's called a snapshot in time. It's going to tell you the book value of assets and liabilities on that day. Okay. Our fiscal year runs from March 1 to the end of February. So February 29th or February 28th. This year it happened to be the 29th. So from March 1 to March 1 of 2023 to February 29, 2024. The balance sheet is as of the one day, February 29, 2024, because that was our fiscal year end. Okay. So we're going to start with the assets. Okay. And I'm going to break them down into big buckets for you. So first one, cash, unrestricted cash, $65.7 million. This is our operating cash. These are our investments, all unrestricted so they can be used for any operational purposes. After that, we've got property and equipment, net of depreciation, $199 million. So all of that is all the property, the land, the buildings, the irrigation, the landscape, all of this equipment that you see, all of the assets that we need to provide the services to the residents. Okay. So certainly the cash and investments is a liquid because it's readily spendable, but the property and equipment is not. It's an illiquid investment. Okay, restricted assets. So what restricted assets are these are assets where their use is specified by an external party that's not a donor. Okay, so think of this as state statutes, contracts, bond indentures, bank loans, things of that nature. They're saying you have to hold these assets and only spend it for a specific purpose. So really good example of what makes up most of this are actually bond funds. We have a bond reserve that is included in there. That bond reserve can only be used in specified instances as indicated in the bond indenture. We also have our entrance fees as far as like our 10% down entrance fees. So when somebody gives 10% down, but they haven't moved in yet, we take the 10%, we put it in the escrow fund, and we put it in restricted assets because state law says you have to keep it there until they either move in or they request a refund. Okay. Once you move in, I can move that 10% out of there. Don't get me wrong. But until that happens, that's included in there. Okay, so those are two really good examples of what's included in there. The rest, everything else, if you add up everything else, inventories, prepaid expenses, receivables, everything else, it adds up to about $1.5 million. So you can see the vast majority of our assets are tied up in those three categories: property and equipment, and cash. So on the other side of the balance sheet, we have liabilities. So assets are what we own, okay? They're going to provide a future benefit to us. Liabilities are what is owed to other parties outside of Royal Oaks, okay? So first and foremost, the biggest one is going to be the bonds. $144.7 million in long-term debt. So this is all of the bonds that are outstanding. There are some bonds that were used to build the Elegante Point Memory Care. Okay, those were issued back in 2014. Construction was completed in 2015, but those bonds are like 30, 35 years, so they're on the books for a little while. Certainly you can pay them off in advance, but because they're public bonds, you'd have to call them. So the most recent bond issue that's in there is obviously the bond issue for the Inspirada Point construction. In that particular instance, it was broken down into two pieces: what are called permanent debt, which are 30 to 35 years, and what's called temporary debt, which is basically very short-term debt from the aspect of they get paid off mostly with initial entrance fees. Okay. So on this number, I do expect it to go down in the future because we've completed construction, so we're no longer drawing down any of those bond funds for construction. But we do have to pay at least a portion of it back with some entrance fees up to a certain amount. Okay. Deferred entrance fees, $75.3 million. So what deferred entrance fees are is all those entrance fees that get paid to us. We don't recognize those right away as revenue. Yes, it's a cash inflow to the organization, but the accounting rules say, you know what? You have people that pay that entrance fee and you're going to provide services to them over the rest of their life. So you need to take that entrance fee and not recognize it all at once, but recognize it over how long you think they're going to be here. And so using an actuarial database that goes through all those tables and estimates, yes, how long each and every one of you will be here. It's an interesting science, but we hire somebody that does that. We basically calculate each one of your entrance fees individual by individual and amortize them, which means recognize a portion of the revenue each year that you're here. So we spread that out. So we put that on our balance sheet, not that we owe the money, because a lot of you are under non-refundable contracts. We don't owe the money, but we can't recognize it all at once. So we have to hold it as a liability, recognize in the future. Now, this one, the refund liability 12.2, this is actually a liability that's owed. So you'll notice the difference. Bond liability, I owe money. Okay, refund liability, I owe money. Deferred means I'm just saving it for the future, but I don't owe it to anybody. Okay, so the refund liability is for those of you that have refundable contracts. So you may have a 50% or a 90% refundable contract. So that at some point will be paid back. Okay, so we record that portion of that refundable contract as a refund liability. Okay, now you can clearly see in comparison to deferred entrance fees, it's a lot smaller. Okay, 85% of the life care contracts that we have here are non-refundable type A life, the bread and butter life A type A contracts, okay? Non-refundable. And the reason is because most people find that to be the best deal for them. The 50% and the 90% are offered, but it combined, they only make up about 15% of our contracts. The reason is because there's a certain segment of the population that says, the non-refundable doesn't work for me, but the refundables do, for whatever reason. Everybody has their own financial situation. And so we offer those products. But that refund has to come back to them at the end of the contract. And so when they pass away and their independent living unit has been reoccupied, then we will pay that out to their estate. Construction payables, $6.2, $6.3 million. So with all the construction that's going on between Inspirada Point and the Vida Center and the dining remodel. Now, the Vida Center was completed by 2/29, but the dining remodel and Inspirada Point were still ongoing. No, Inspirada Point was mostly done, but we still had a retainage on there. That's what it was. So basically what it is as things are being constructed, we hold back a certain percentage as retainage to make sure they complete the job. This is mostly made up of retainage. Now, a lot of this was paid out after year end. So after 2/29/2024, because the buildings were turned over, they were completed, we have certificate of occupancy, everything was completed in order for them to get the retainage. But you can see it was a significant liability. Last year, if you were here, that number was like close to 10 million. 2/29/24, it's now 6-something million, and it's pretty much going to go away next year because a lot of the construction, almost every construction will be complete. Not to say we're never going to start up something again, but all of these projects will be done. And then all the other liabilities combined, accounts payable, payroll taxes, accrued interest on the bonds, there's a myriad of other things. They add up to about $6.6 million. So again, a lot of the liabilities tied up in about two or three things: 144.7 in bonds, 75.3 in deferred entrance fees, I should say, 12.2 in a refund liability. Those are the big chunks, if you will. Okay. Now, the one thing about a balance sheet is it has to balance, right? Well, if you were adding up, who was adding them up? One person in the back. Thank you. If you were adding them up, your assets were about $294 million. But your liabilities were 240 some odd million, 245 million. So the equation for a balance sheet to balance is your assets have to equal your liabilities plus your equity. Okay. Now, for those of you that may have owned your own businesses, that's your owner's equity, your shareholders' equity, things of that nature. We don't have that in the not-for-profit space. We call it net assets. Okay. But basically what net assets is your assets minus your liabilities. Okay. So that's a positive $49 million. So again, the equity is a positive equity. We're not in a deficit situation from that particular aspect. Having said that, just remember, you've got $199 million of assets that, are these buildings that can't quite be liquidated, but you also have about $144 million of debt, which is secured by that property. So the rest is all just kind of mostly current stuff that ebbs and flows, but those are going to be the long-term ones. So now the balance sheet was a snapshot of the one day. Where were we at the end of the day, 2/29/2024? Okay. The operating statement or the income statement or the P&L or whatever you called it when you were maybe, in business, running your own business, owning your own business, whatever it was, whatever you called it shows you what happened to the net assets over a period of time. So our fiscal year runs from March 1 to the end of February. So this is going to be from the time frame of March 1, 2023 through to 29, 2024. And this shows you how net assets changed. Okay, what were the incomes that were coming in? What were the expenses going out? And we're going to break this down by things that are operations versus things that are not operations. And you'll see what I mean when you mean like, well, what's not operations around here? You'll see what I mean when I get to it. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is operating revenues. Okay. These are mostly fees that are collected from residents. So you can see right at the top, monthly service fees, $19.3 million. Those are the monthly service fees that are collected from the residents that are in independent living. For residents that move over to a higher level of care, to assisted living, we do move their revenue. They still pay their monthly service fee, but we move their revenue to a slightly different classification, which is under health services. And you'll see that there are 3.7 million. So 19.3 million and 3.7 million, you've got about $23 million in just monthly service fees alone for the year. Community residents of 2.2. So what community residents are, there is additional capacity that we have in our assisted living in the Elegante Point Apartments, Memory Care, and the Care Center. And we can basically sell that capacity to the outside. Now, these are direct admits into the assisted living. They don't have life care. So they're going to pay the full market rate. Like if they're in the care center, they're going to be paying like $8,900 a month, almost $9,000 a month. You guys aren't going to pay that. You have life care, but they're going to pay it because they have the resources to do so and they need that level of care. Okay. And so all of those individuals add up to the revenue from those individuals, I should say, add up to about $2.2 million. Okay. Some of the smaller pieces of revenue, $660,000 from the meal per diems. And this is really what that is this is from life care residents that move over to assisted living. So in your life care contract, you have one meal a day that's paid for. But when you go to assisted living, we're going to provide all 3 meals. Okay. Well, one meal is already included in your monthly service fee. So we do have to bill you the other 2 meals. Okay. And for those of you that may have had a friend or a loved one that was in assisted living, you know this. Supplies and other, very small amount, but I just want to show you most of the, from our perspective, a lot of the things that we provide are inclusive. Yes, we charge you for we charge you the cost of some medical supplies if you happen to use it. And sometimes in assisted living, somebody wants to use our telephone service or something of that nature, and we'll provide that. But you can see in the vast majority of these revenues, it's very, 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 very small. You pay the monthly service fee. The monthly service fee includes quite a bit. Other revenues of about 1.4 million is everything it just wraps up. There's like, if you happen to go over on your dining dollars and you have some additional meal fees related to that overage, it goes in there. Guest meals goes in there. Transfer fees goes in there. All kinds of little things that we do rent some spaces around here to outside providers, goes in there. So it's a lot of activities that we do have, but they're small. They're too small to list individually here, so I've kind of grouped them up for purposes of illustration. All told, operating revenues $27.5 million. So that's the operating cash in the door, but we have to provide the services. And so we have to look at the cost to provide the services. So these are our operating expenses to provide the services to the residents. Okay, so you can clearly see at the top, 16.9, almost $17 million of salaries and wages, and about $3.9 million of employee taxes and benefits. Okay, so you're looking at almost $21 million of labor costs. So even though those are 2 separate lines, they're really mostly indistinguishable. When I pay wages to an employee, I have to pay taxes associated with that. I have to provide certain level of benefits, both regulatory reasons and just competition. I have to go out there and compete for labor. This is the cost of labor. So you can see the total is $31 million. 21 million of that, or 2/3 of the cost, is people. Now, it makes sense. We're in a service driven industry. We provide care, we provide meals. This is all very service driven, and you need the people to deliver and provide that service. Okay. So, other things, medical supplies and drugs, I like to leave it up there, even though it's a small number. It's about $65,000. This includes not only the supplies that we pass through to charges in assisted living, but it also includes the disposable gloves, face masks, things of that nature if we need them. Back during COVID in 2020, that number was 4 times what that number is now. Okay. So prices have come back down. I'm not going to say they're normal. They're still up from pre-COVID, but at least they're more reasonable. Professional and contracted services, 2.6 million. That's going to have our insurance in there. It's going to have payroll providing services, information technology services, all kinds of accounting services, all kinds of various professional services. Property and equipment services, 1.6 million. That's going to be mostly parts and materials for maintenance, but it also includes if we use outside vendors and we have maintenance contracts and things of that nature, or if we need somebody specialized to come in and do a particular repair because we may not have the experience, or something of that nature. So, food, 2.4 million. This is the raw food cost. There's food in the door before they even prepped it. $2.5 million, or just under $2.5 million. Utilities, 1.8 million. Keep an eye on this number. If you have last year's with you, you see that number is significantly up from the prior year. Other is basically everything else that doesn't really fit into any of these categories. For purposes of illustration, they're all just grouped into other, 2.1. So total, $31.7 million. And again, for those of you keeping track, you're probably going to say, well, wait a minute, the number on the previous slide was smaller than the number on this slide. And the short answer is you are correct. So there is an operating loss for last year of 4.2 million, almost 4.3 million. And there is a reason for it. And the reason is because basically we were completing construction of Inspirada Point. We completed B and C in, I want to say we got those buildings in March, April of 2023. And we got buildings D and E in October 31, November 1 of 2023 as well. So as part of this, those operating expenses include a lot of staffing up to prepare for basically getting those units online and having the units online. And anybody want to guess how many people can move in on one day? I can tell you, we had 140 units come online last year. Not all 140 can move in on the same day. Heather's up for it. She could do it. But realistically, people's schedules don't work that way. Logistically, we can't have that many moving trucks on this campus. You get the drill. They move in over time. So this is what's called, this last year is what we basically call a startup loss. Royal Oaks has been around for 40 years, but Inspirada Point was brand new, and there was a heavy startup loss with getting those buildings turned over to us. Now, we did plan for this inside the feasibility study of the project, and also in the structuring of the debt on the project. We arranged what was called a working capital fund. What we do is we take the first $7 million of initial entrance fees on the project and we put them into a working capital fund. After that, they can be used to pay down the debt. So we funded that working capital first. Then when we open, we can draw down from that working capital to offset startup losses. So accounting rules say I have $4.2 million in accounting losses, but how much cash did I have to spend on that? Zero. Because we had prepared for that. We had a $7 million working capital to fund startup losses, knowing that we would have a year where they would be relatively heavy. And how many of you maybe started your own business, or maybe you work for a company and you started a new division or a new product line or something like that? You don't have to raise your hands, but you remember those times when you had startup losses. And there were two things. It's like, I have my startup losses. How am I going to cover them? And how long are they going to be? Right? Those are the questions that you're going to ask. So we've got about $7 million that we set aside to help cover that. Okay. So we'll take that loss. We will add the expense from the interest on the long-term debt. That brings it down to about a $6.7 million deficit. This is just the interest that we could record as expense. The total interest payments were about $7 million, but a portion can get capitalized as the project was ongoing. So you're going to see that interest expense start to increase. Again, we had some pre-funding to help cover this during construction because the revenues have to catch up later. The revenues will catch up and be able to pay the interest, but we had to do a little bit of funding of the interest up front. Okay. Take that 6.7 million. We're going to add in some of these non-operating things, and this is what we're going to. This is what I talked about before. We're separating operations from non-operations. Well, we get investment income, which is really great, but we're not an investment firm or an insurance company, so this is not operations. It's just ancillary investment income. $1.7 million from investments, realized gains of $2.4 million. So right there, that's another kind of cash inflow that helps offset some of these losses. So realized gain, which differs from unrealized gain, which we'll get to in a minute. So realized gain is you were able to capture that. You actually have the money in hand. I bought an investment for $100 and then I sold it for $120. I've sold it. I now have a $20 realized gain because I have it in my hand. Okay. Investment expenses, we do have an investment manager that we do have to pay, so that was $240,000. Transfer from the foundation, this is from the help with the construction cost of the Vita Center. So that was a cash transfer from the foundation to Royal Oaks for about $1.9 million. But then we did do a cash transfer out to Cactus Sky. Cactus Sky is an LLC company that we hold, that we use to make real estate purchases or investigate real estate purchases or any other type of growth initiative such as that. So when we net all of this in here, we've brought that 6.7 deficit to a $1.8 million deficit. So, okay, we're making progress here. There still are a few other things. Now, these are the accounting items, or what I call mostly the accounting items. These are non-cash items. So you can see earned entrance fees, 7.4 million. So we get a lot of entrance fees. Last year we had a lot of move-ins. We probably had $30 million of entrance fees. But you don't see $30 million here, you see 7.4. Because the accounting rules said you have to recognize that revenue over the life of the resident, the time that you're providing the services. So I can bring all that cash in, but I have to record a deferral to basically record some of that in the future. So that's why this is non-cash, because it's a calculation that says you can recognize a portion of that money that you received. Unrealized gains, this is also non-cash. This is just the change in the investment. If you bought that investment for $100 and you're holding on to it and it is now worth $120, yes, you've had a $20 gain, but it's an unrealized gain. You don't have it in your hand. It's still subject to market fluctuations. Depreciation, $9.3 million. So remember that $199 million property and equipment? Same thing. We don't expense it right away. We expense it over how long we think the asset will be in for lack of a better word, production, in operations. And last, we have marketing expenses. Now, this is a cash outlay, but this is kind of separate because marketing for expansion is not quite the same as marketing for an existing operation. So this will start to, the marketing for expansion will start to wind down with the completion of the construction. So that doesn't mean any of those marketing efforts are going to go away. They might just be recategorized into part of operations. So brings all of that from 1.8 million deficit to a $2.9 million positive. So for the year, the total net income was a positive 2.9 million. Now, granted, the operations was negative, which we prepared for, but we also were able to post a net income because of our investment results in that particular year. And that was a fire hose of information in less than 20 minutes. So before I go on to the next section, I'm going to pause here and say, do you have any questions about the balance sheet, the income statement? I will point out, I'm going to go back a couple things, is with that $4.2 million negative, remember, I have all the units online at 229.24, but I don't even have a full year of people being in those units at that time. That's why it's a startup loss. I have a lot of expenses that we ramped up, and the revenues haven't yet. As more people move in, then the net operating margin there will increase, or the loss will decrease, but whichever way you want to look at it. So. So I don't have the budget up here, but I want to say we were a little bit under on our revenue projections by about 3%, but we were under on our budgeted expenses by about 7%. So overall, we budgeted for about $6 million net operating loss right here, and we ended up with about 4.2. So even though we realized we had an 8-month delay in construction, we delayed a lot of the expenses that we could, and realizing that we were going to miss our revenue projections. Does that make sense? So in the back there, and I apologize, I forgot to mention we do have microphones. Um, so might want to wait for a microphone so everybody can hear. He had asked a question about the budget, so I forgot to repeat that. Yes.
I was wondering how many of the units have to be currently occupied to make all of these numbers work.
So the question is like, yeah, how many units have to be occupied to make all these numbers work? So the one thing I don't have is I don't have a full year. I can tell you that in the feasibility study that was done several years ago, so it has to kind of be dusted off and updated. I want to say that just Inspirata Point alone, I wanted to say for Inspirata Point to be self-sufficient on its own debt, I want to say that was close to about, if it had a full year of revenues, it would need about 65 to 70% to full to cover its own operating expenses and the interest on its debt. For Royal Oaks campus as a whole, we would probably need to get somewhere between 85 and 90%, which is actually pretty typical for a life plan community. A lot of life plan communities, they usually run about 87, 88% in their independent living. So we're trying to get to, like if we were at 90%, we would actually be on the positive side. So my estimate standing right here before you is probably around 84, 85% for the campus as a whole. We're not quite there yet, but we are filling up towards that. Yes?
Your investment income this year, how do you anticipate this coming year to be at the same level?
So the question was the investment income for this year, do you expect it to be at the same level next year? And the short answer is no. The total gains, if you look at interest, realized gains, and unrealized gains, you're looking at 8.2 plus, 2.3, sorry, 2.4. So that's, 10.6 plus, and, I mean, we're looking at $14 million. It was over a 20% gain in 1 year. I don't expect to repeat a 20% this year. It's probably going to be more in the single digits. I would say the interest and dividends are going to be close. Certainly, there was a decline in some long-term bond yield. It started occurring like July, August is when the yield started coming down because they were anticipating a cut, but they were anticipating a 0.25 cut and it was about 0.5. But for at least half the year, I mean, we were getting, just on a money market alone was 5%. And we had some we had some bonds that were beyond that. But our portfolio is about 75, 80% equities and about, the rest is mostly bonds and cash after that. So about, 25 to 20% bonds and cash. So the interest will go down, but just realize dividends actually still makes up a good portion of that because we have 75 to 80% equities actually. So in the back here, and then we'll go over here.
Just a quick question, because I know all of us deal with our food dollars.
Food dollars.
You mentioned that. Can you just touch on that a little bit more, how our unused food dollars go?
So let me tell you where they all are, first of all. Okay. So if you look at this revenue, where do you think the food dollars are? There it is, monthly service fees. That's exactly correct. So monthly service fees includes one meal. We use the dining dollars as an estimate of if you went anywhere on campus, what would it average out to be over a 30-day period? Well, you could go to breakfast for like maybe $8 or something less than that. And then yes, lunch and dinner are probably a little bit more than $11.50. Dinner can sometimes be $20. I grant you that. The thing about it is, over all the meals that are offered over this entire campus over a 30-day span, we come up with to say, if we calculate about $11.50 per person per day, that it comes out to about one meal a day. And you say, where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere. I recognize the same amount of money, whether you spend the dining dollars or not. The only thing that happens is if you spend more than the dining dollars you have, there's more revenue in here in the other revenue. If you spend less, I don't recognize less revenue. So it doesn't go anywhere on the income statement. It's right here in the monthly service fee. So that's why I always encourage the residents, spend it down to the last penny. Because I don't reduce my revenue, I don't record an expense, I don't get additional cash. When you pay me the monthly service fee, I put it in the cash in that unrestricted cash dollar you saw. That's where the cash goes. The allocation that you see of dining dollars, that doesn't have a cash value. It can only be used here. So, did that help answer your question? All right, let's go here.
We spent $1 million on Cactus. I forgot what it was.
Cactus Sky. Yep.
Yeah. What exactly are they doing with that money?
Right now they're sitting on it. So let me tell you what they're doing with the money. So the money that's transferred to Cactus Sky is for future growth of Royal Oaks. Where Inspirata Point is now, that didn't used to belong to Royal Oaks. We had to actually go and buy that. We actually bought the business and the land that was on it. So what the board of directors said is, rather than needing to spend if we have to ever pull $10 million of cash out of the reserve, which is what they had to do to buy the Carillons, where Inspirata Point is now, rather than have that one $10 million pull all at one time, we're going to fund over time what we call a growth initiative. And we're going to take $1 million, $2 million a year, whatever it is, and move that over to a separate company. It is now outside the obligated group, so we still do it responsibly, because the bond says you can only move so much money outside of the obligated group at a time. And so they're basically taking a calculated financial decision to say, we think somewhere down the line, we're going to have another acquisition somewhere. It could be land, it could be another organization like we did with the Carillons. But rather than try to have that big $10 million all at once, we're going to move that over time to this Cactus Sky, and it's there anytime we need it for a growth initiative. In the back, and then, okay, we got 2 more questions, one here and one there, and then we got to move on.
2 questions relative to your largest expenditure on
2?
personnel.
I thought it was 1.
Well, it's 2 in 1.
Okay.
Personnel, your largest single cost.
Yes.
First, what's your guesstimate for the next year? And
Okay.
2, is there a hiring moratorium?
So the first question I would like to defer because I have a slide on that. So we can answer that question when we get to the slide. The second question is, there is no hiring moratorium. Okay. However, the reason I use the word however, I'm not even going to use the word, scratch that. And there's no hiring moratorium, and we also, where possible, staffed census. So you tell me if this is a hiring moratorium, and I want all your feedback, okay? Okay? So if I have a census of 100 people that are in assisted living, okay, and then it drops to say 95, do I still need to keep the same number of caregiver there? Now, I'm not going to let anybody go. I'm not going to dismiss any of my caregivers, but I'm going to reduce the hours over time so that my staffing levels correspond to my census levels. Is that a hiring moratorium? Okay. What if I did it for independent living? What if I have a campus that's not full, and I've got several empty units, and we have all the housekeepers that clean the empty units, okay? One of them leaves, okay, for whatever reason. They retire, they found another job somewhere else, whatever the reason is. Before I replace that housekeeper, I'm going to go look and see, well, how many empty units do we have? Because the empty units, every one of you that's here, you get your units cleaned twice a week. Empty units don't need that frequent. Twice a month, thank you. Not twice a week. Don't hold me to that. You get it every 2 weeks. Woo, good save. Thank you, Patty. But a unit that's empty doesn't need that frequency of cleaning. It might need it once a month. I'm not going to see, because it's Arizona, right? Okay. So I can save that time if maybe I don't replace that housekeeper and I reallocate. That doesn't mean the housekeeper goes away. I still have that position, and I will fund that position as people move in. So is that a hiring moratorium, or is me just saying I have the ability to make a cost savings until my occupancy comes back up? A hiring moratorium, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, you tell me, hiring moratorium or a hiring freeze is nobody gets hired no matter what. And I'm like, but that's not the case. I have an objective metric. This isn't my emotion guiding me. This is a number. It's a measurement. And when that measurement gets to a certain level, it triggers and that person gets hired or that position gets hired. So my question is, do you interpret that as a hiring freeze or a hiring moratorium? Okay, I would agree with you. But if I came up here and said, yep, we're just saving money for the rest of the budget year, I'm not hiring anybody for the rest of the fiscal year, I would totally agree with you and say there's a hiring moratorium. But that's not what's happening. So last question, then I got to move on.
I think this may need a clarification, or maybe it's an error. I have friends over in assisted living.
Yes.
They just moved in a month ago. They tell me they're being billed on their monthly service fee for 3 meals a day. I said, that doesn't make any sense. They said, that's the way it is, and I gave up until 5 minutes ago. You said they're being billed for 2.
They're being billed for 2, yes.
Is it on their monthly service fee, just 2?
No.
Or is it magically massaged around?
No, it's not magically massaged around. It is specifically stated. So they have a monthly service fee, and on their statement, it specifically says monthly service fee. Then below that, they'll have an item that says meal charge. Those are the 2 additional meals. So inside the monthly service fee is 1 meal.
Sure.
The meal charge is the other 2 meals. So they are getting charged 3 meals. So that is accurate.
On the monthly service fee, the additional line is only for 2.
Correct.
Okay. So they're making a mistake when they tell me, even though
They're getting billed for 3 meals. It's just split between.
No, they
2
say
lines.
they're being, well, but the extra, they're saying the extra was 3 meals. So I didn't understand.
No, the extra's 2 meals.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got it.
I got
Okay.
what you're saying. now.
Thank you. Got
So,
it. Clear.
All right. All right.
Thank
So
you.
I need you to hold your question because in the interest of time, I got to move on and I still have like a ton of information here. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So now I got to get back to where I was. Make me lose my place. Oh, here we go. So we have debt covenants attached to our debt. These are basically certain metrics that they want us to maintain. So our debt covenant metrics are 120 days cash on hand and a 1.2 debt service coverage. We have about, as of 229, because that's when you measure it, we had about 800 days cash on hand and a 2.1 debt service coverage. So we're doing well on our metrics. The debt service coverage, it is a calculation that's actually outlined in the bond indenture. So it's a specific, you can get it by looking at the financials, but you have to read the bond indenture of how to calculate it. So basically it comes down to, can you pay your debt, your annual debt 1.2 times? Well, we can pay it 2.1 times. So we're doing well. Okay. Foundation, we're briefly going to go over some financial results from the foundation. Okay. So again, kind of the same thing. Their total assets, 30.3 million. Okay, in assets. Most of that is in their investments. Okay, they have about $4.4 million in liabilities. There is a loan to the corporation in that, or actually they borrowed from a line of credit of about 2.5 million and they loaned that to Royal Oaks. So in the assets, there's about $2.5 million receivable from Royal Oaks. There's also in the 4.4 liabilities, a 2.5 liability on a line of credit. The 2 of them net to 0. There's no effect on the foundation. Even the interest and the fees are paid by Royal Oaks. Royal Oaks was using that little borrowing to help fund the financing of the dining remodel. Okay, that will be paid back to the foundation over time. Net assets, 25.9 million. The breakdown of net assets, though, is between donor restricted and unrestricted. So restricted by donors, $2.2 million. And the remainder is unrestricted. So the $2.2 million is a donor says, I'm going to give, but I want it to be restricted to the EAF or to some capital improvement or something of that nature. They put some sort of restriction on it. And so we have to keep it in this restricted bucket until we spend it according to the donor's restrictions. Unrestricted is, here's a donation. Great, thank you. We appreciate that. Now that can be spent on any of the foundation's purposes that Chuck went over. And by the way, if none of you have been, well, I wouldn't say none of you, if any of you here have not been to the Get to Know Your Foundation that they had back in July, I would highly, 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 highly recommend going to the next one. They will do another one, okay? I don't have the exact dates for you here, but look for it. If you didn't go to the last one, I encourage you to go to this one because we all know the big things that the foundation does, but it does a lot of little things too. And sometimes you'd probably be surprised by some of the little things it does. So, but let's take a look at some of the big things for the foundation. Contribution revenue for the year, $930,000. Okay. Net investment income, $6.4 million. That does include interest, realized gains, dividends, unrealized gains, all of that. Programmatic expenditures just under $3.7 million, and these are the more significant programs that it's spent on. Resident subsidies of about $540,000. The EAF program, which is about another $540,000, and the transfer to Royal Oaks for the Vita Center that was mentioned earlier. So just an FYI on the EAF, those donations that come from residents, every single penny that you give goes directly to the employees. I mean, it goes to the foundation, don't get me wrong, but there are, whenever we give money, whenever we pay money to the employees, the federal government wants it cut. So there's taxes. Both Royal Oaks and the foundation have stepped up to say, no, we'll pay the taxes. So if the residents give $500,000, $500,000 gets doled out to the employees. That's the amount. If you added up all the checks that were issued or the net pays, that's what hits their bank account. All the additional monies that we have to pay for the federal government or the state government for taxes, Royal Oaks and the foundation cover that. So we do make sure on the employee appreciation program, like if you give $10, then $10 is going to make it there. So, all right, now everybody's favorite subject, inflation. Maybe it's just mine. So this is the latest inflation 20-year inflationary trend. So this is a rolling 12-month, month by month for the last 20 years. You can clearly see a little spike above 5% back in 2008, and then a big spike just under 10%, 21-22. Now, excuse me, it has come down a little bit. I'm not going to say there hasn't been improvement because there clearly has. I mean, it was up here, it's now down here. Okay, you can kind of see it's still above. Like everybody remembers this because this was the good times, right? We all remember the good times. Yeah, 0. Yeah. Still got a ways to go. Okay. So, inflation. It is sitting at 2.5%, the CPI. Okay. Granted, it's a relatively arbitrary measurement, but it gives us a flavor of what's going on with inflation. However, just realize the average over the last 20 years, the average of all of this is 2.6. Okay. So consider that between May 2021 and March 23, inflation was never less than 5% on a rolling 12 months. So for that period of time, not quite 2 years, maybe a year and a half. So what did everything else have to do to pull that back down to 2.6%? So I still think we got a little bit of work to do on this. But from March 2023 to August 24, 3.54% was the average. Last year, that was above 4. Trending in the right direction. Okay. So there's some exceptions to the rule. We're getting hit on the Royal Oaks side. We're getting hit on our utilities and our insurance. Let me tell you why. So utilities was up about 24% from 2022 to 2023, and we project another 15% from 2023 to 2024. I know what you're thinking. You just added a bunch of new buildings over there. Of course utilities went up. And you are correct to a point. We added square footage, but if you add up all the square footage, especially air-conditioned square footage that we added over there, it's only an additional 23% square footage. So yes, half of this 40+% increase is increased square footage. The other half is everybody jacking their rates. Electricity, gas, water, everything. Okay? That's certainly well above what we anticipated. Property and liability insurance was up 10% from 22 to 23. That's mostly because of the new builds. We added the new square footage, the new builds, their wood frames. There was an increase related to that, okay? That's what most of that 10%. But now I'm getting another 10% from 23 to 24. So when I asked about this 10%, it has to do with basically the natural disasters. Just think about insurance companies and what insurance companies do. They pool risk. So our biggest insurance carrier is Nationwide. Okay, apropos name. Okay, they are all over the nation. That does mean they are in hurricane areas. It does mean they are in tornado areas. It does mean they are in earthquake areas. And so, and there's a hurricane coming for Florida again. So here's the thing is when you have these very expensive disasters and you have insurance covering it, it affects the entire pool. Now, I have talked to CFOs who are in Florida, okay? Their rates are 40 to 50% higher on their premiums, plus limited coverage. I know a CFO is a $100 million building. He can only get insured up to 40 million. So he's paying an additional 40% premium for less coverage, and now he has to self-insure for almost 50 to 60 million dollars of risk. I mean, granted, that's a total catastrophic loss, but I mean, you see the news, you see the hurricanes coming. It's within the realm of possibility. So they're like, we're not in the direct path of these natural disasters, but we do get indirectly impacted because we are in a risk pool with others. There are some, not all, but there are some carriers that are just saying we're not going to be in Florida anymore. Thankfully, we're not. That's the other thing that's going to drive up costs in Florida. Lack of competition. We are not in a state that does that. So I don't like 10%, but in the grand scheme of things of what I've been hearing about people that are in Carolina, Florida, and don't forget Tornado Alley, Nebraska, Kansas. You think nothing's going on around there? You think nothing's going on in Nebraska? It's part of Tornado Alley, okay? So they're getting some higher than expected premiums as well. So we got hit on here well more than even I expected on that one. Okay, let's talk about wages. You had that question on wages. So looking forward to wages. Private industry, I pulled this from the Bureau. This is only through June because they only release this quarterly. Private industry is up through June, about 4.1%. It may come down a little bit with the latest report, but I don't see significant change. What's expected to impact Royal Oaks? Well, they break it down by industry, and granted, these are nationwide, okay? 3.7% leisure and hospitality. Arizona is a leisure and hospitality state, okay? Our main business is tourism. All the servers, all the cooks, all the housekeepers, okay? We have to compete with all the resorts for them, okay? All the restaurants, okay? Healthcare and social assistance, all those caregivers, we have to compete. Hospital systems, home care services, hospice services, we have to compete with all of that. And this is, believe it or not, care, healthcare is also a big business out here as well. So, one thing we got going for us, we are in the 5th largest city in the United States. If you look at the metropolitan area, the Phoenix and all its suburbs around it, it is the 5th largest city in the United States, or 5th metropolitan area, I should say, in the United States. It's very, very large. That does keep our labor pool very, very large. Most of our employees live within a 10-mile radius. I'm not going to lie, they do. But having a very good population really does help. There are some more rural communities that they're seeing spikes higher than this because they're in a rural community. That's, again, the supply and demand, right? So now I'm going to get into occupancy, but before I finish with inflation, I always get the question because you're all asking it right now, and somebody asked it in the previous session. Well, do you have a projection for what my monthly service fee increase is going to be? And the answer is no, I do not. But I'm giving you the information I have available right now. Do with it what you will. And I know the CPI said 2.5%, but the wages are above that. Now, the last time I checked, every one of us usually says, it's a good thing when wage inflation outpaces inflation, right? So we're getting more into some normal territory. The numbers are still too high, but we're getting more into some normal territory. Remember when inflation was at 1.8 or 9% and wage growth was like 4 or 5. That's a big problem overall. We've at least got those numbers flipped on a national average, so they're trending in the right direction. Okay, occupancy. So we are just about at time. So it is 3 o'clock. If anybody here has another appointment that they need to get to, and you need to leave, by all means, please go ahead and do so. I'm not going to be offended much. But You can go, but I just want to be aware that it is 3 o'clock, and I know some of you may have some tight schedules. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Okay. So thank you for your time. So occupancy. One of the things I've been hearing is, why do we have a few empty apartments or quite a few empty apartments? And the answer is yes, but let me show you why that is. Okay. So I've got a graph here, and you've got like kind of this orangish line, and you've got this blue line. The orange line is the total number of independent living homes we have available. And you see a big spike right here because buildings B and C at Inspirata Point came online. And you see a bigger spike over here because buildings D and E came online. 41 units, 99 units. All told, 140 units. Okay. The blue line is how many units are actually occupied. Now, certainly there was a gap here, and there'll always be a little bit of a gap because you can't be 100% occupied. You always have turnover, right? There's a little bit of a gap here, but you'll notice, look at the trend line. The trend line of how many units are occupied is still on the up. It's flattened out a little bit here. That's usually because that's what summers do. But the trend line over the last 2 years is still up. But it definitely looks like there's more because we keep adding units. Now we're done with adding units, okay? But let me show you what it looks like on an occupancy percentage, okay? So same numbers, but I converted the number to an occupancy percent. So the percentage is over here. Number of units still climbs, okay? Occupancy was hovering at around 90%, which is pretty good. Remember 90%, I said we'd throw it above, you turn that loss into a gain, right? We add this many units and they don't all move in at once, occupancy drops because the percent drops because the denominator just got bigger. Okay, then we start filling and filling and filling and filling, and then we add 99 units, it drops again. And then we start filling and filling and filling and filling and filling. So we're in a fill-up process. So we're hovering around 80% or so, okay? So we were at 90%, we added like 140 units, and now we're at 80%, okay? Now, the one thing that drives my marketing director nuts, and is she here? Oh, darn, it's all right. The one thing that drives my marketing director nuts, but maybe it drives the entire marketing team nuts for all I know, is they're like, we're not at 80%, we're like at 85 or 86%. I'm like, yes, you have people contracted, but I don't count them until they move in. So that's just me. So we do have quite a few. In all fairness to the marketing team, we do have probably another 5 or 6% that's contracted and ready to move in, and we want them to move in the next 60 days. Okay. So I do see that this number will continue to increase, but I want you to notice if you're like, I see a lot of empty homes, my answer is yes, I do too, but that's because we brought in 140 new units. Well, I see them at Royal Oaks, right? Because we brought in 140 new shinier homes. Royal Oaks is shiny, but it's a 40-year-old shiny. This other one is like brand spanking new shiny, and most people just, they gravitate towards that. It's human nature. Who wouldn't, right? Okay? What do you mean, Okay, all right. Who wants that Pontiac GTO from the 1970s? Yeah, No, not a classic car. We're talking like it's got 200 some odd thousand miles on it. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm just saying there is nostalgia obviously in it, but it's not a fair comparison. But the reality is Royal Oaks, the 40-year-old eastern side of the campus, whatever you want to call it. I like to call it just the existing campus before Inspirata Point, the original campus, whatever you want to call it. It's in great shape for a 40-year-old building. It really is. It's in fantastic shape. But I want you to be honest with yourselves and compare it to Inspirata Point only from the aspect of just the design of the room. Not the aesthetics, but the design of the room. The kitchens are a little bit bigger. The great room / living room is a little bit bigger. And the consumers that are buying stuff today gravitate towards those things. They don't select them all the time, but they gravitate towards that. There's still quite a few people that want the smaller units, that want the location right next to the fitness center, right next to the pool, right next to all of the central stuff. There's still plenty of people out there that want that. But I'm saying is there is a period of time that as we fill up Inspirada Point, we are unintentionally competing with ourselves. As Inspirada Point fills and selection becomes a little bit more difficult over there, as far as the lack of inventory, because we just had people moving in, which is great. The more they're gonna, because like I said, most people want to move into Royal Oaks, and if newer and a slightly bigger kitchen is available and they can afford it, they'll take it. I think we're going to start seeing that people want to move into Royal Oaks, but that unit over there isn't better. But this one is still really good and it's closer. Oh, I'm going to take that one. You will start to see things fill up over time. And I know I saw Nick back there, but he's not here right now. So Nick, our refurbishing, so he's been doing a great job getting a lot of these empty units pretty much show ready and move in ready. So we've got them ready to go. Okay. All right, I do want to show you some move-ins. So this is our move-ins over the last couple of years, okay? So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and you can see definitely peaks and valleys and peaks and valleys. And you'll notice where most of the valleys are. The valleys are in the summertime. So a lot of times I get comments in June and July, wow, I don't see too many people moving in. I'd be like, right, it's 115 degrees out and they're all in Wisconsin or Michigan or Minnesota and they don't want to put their house up for sale and a lot of other reasons. But this is a little spiky because of Inspirada Point. So I said, you know what? Let me just pull Inspirada Point out of there because that's a brand new build. It's a little bit of but even without Inspirada Point, look at it again. It's still spiky. It ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows. And you're going to find the summertime being the very lowest. They're just out of town, or they don't want to move, or they don't want to list their home, or whatever the reason. So you get comments, this went out, there it goes. And a lot of times in the summer that it's like, I don't see a lot of people moving in. And I'm like, I agree with you. That's why I said, wait until October, November, December, and even January and February, you're probably going to see some spikes. And I think, remember that graph, we were around 80%. That's why I think we're going to see a little bit of a spike in this fall, winter area, because we traditionally do. So, all right. With that, now we'll open it up to any questions anybody has regarding what was in the presentation. Oh, over here. Sorry.
The residents help with the utility bills?
Can the residents help with the utility bills?
I mean, that we would be more conscious of where we're putting our thermostats?
The residents can control their thermostats, but we're not going to monitor or we're not going to put a system in that that basically keeps your apartment at a certain level or anything
Right,
of that
right.
nature. I think if residents want to increase their thermostats on their own, that's fine. I don't think that's where it is. Most of the residents probably don't keep them at 72 or anything of
Right,
that nature.
okay. I just
So,
wondered.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will say where we see some spikes in utility usage is mostly in the common areas. Like here's a really good example. I'll bet you $10 the thermostat here is probably set to 70 or 72, but you're not feeling it because of all the people that are in here. So we try to be careful about the common areas and maybe cranking them up when they're not being used and stuff like that, but that does become a little bit difficult. I will say we have done over the last several years some energy efficient improvements with lighting, both indoor and outdoor lighting. And when we did replace the HVAC units on this one, we got more efficient systems and stuff like that. And as we replace the HVAC units, we still have some older ones that still need to be replaced. So we're doing the best that we can on that. But right now, we're not at a point where we have to do some sort of monitoring what's going on in each apartment because right now we just don't think it's necessary. Right now, this is not increased usage. This is just increased rates. Yeah. So, right here. Sorry. Yeah, you did have a question earlier. I'm sorry.
You answered most of them, but
Perfect.
is there any outstanding issues with stunt as far as performance issues? It seems like we've got air conditioning problems and other things going up, and I don't know whether that's a design issue or quality issue with stunt.
So we talked about the air conditioning issue. Which air conditioning? I have more than one. The kitchen. Okay. So the question is do we have any issues with sunt quality or anything of that nature? And the short answer is yes and no. So here's the thing: did Sunt make some mistakes in its construction? Sure. I dare anybody to have a $100 million construction and not have a GC make some. I will say Sunt owns their mistakes. Okay. The air conditioning is not a strictly Sunt issue. I think the issue in the kitchen. Let me explain what it is. So over in the Inspirata Point Culinary Building, the air conditioning is in the kitchen, not in the dining venues. The air conditioner in the dining venues is fine. The system that's in that commercial kitchen is designed to at least be 30 degrees cooler than the outside air. So if it's 110 degrees out, should be 80 degrees in the kitchen, even with all their equipment on. Okay? The problem is that differential is not 30 degrees, it's 15 degrees. It's designed for 30. So to go from 110 air and bring the ambient temperature down to 80 while there's a lot of equipment on, I mean, it needs to be pumping out like 60 or 55 degree air just to equalize it at 80, right? And it's not doing that. It can only get it down to around 90. If it's 110 out, about 95. That's unsafe. We can't have people working in those conditions, unfortunately. So what we're going to do is we've got the architect, the engineers, and Sunt involved, and we're saying it's not working as it's designed to work. Now, we're asking you to get it to work the way it's supposed to work. Okay, that's our first thing. So we think we've got the design. We think we've got it redesigned, and we'll come in probably next summer, rip up the ceilings, fix the issues, and so we can be open all year round. Now, the question I got is, why would you wait till next summer? And I'm like, well, because it is going to start cooling down. And once it gets to around 95 degrees around here, we can, don't hold me to it, but, because it spikes, obviously. But once it gets in the mid 90s, low 90s, we can probably open up that kitchen again, and it would be safe for the staff to work in there. Well, if it's going to be cooler weather, and the system, even though it's not functioning great, it functions enough in the cooler weather, why would I close it down then? Let's open it up during the nice weather, and then when it starts to peak up again, we'll shut it down, because we'd have to anyway for safety. Then we'll go in there, rip open what we need to, fix it, and then patch it up. Okay? And then at that point, then I'll be like, okay, now I need to send the bill somewhere. Who do I send it to? Okay? The parties know who they are. I do get comments. Should I get an attorney involved? I do have an attorney involved, but the attorney is mostly just an FYI. Hey, I'm here. I don't want to do anything, but I'm aware of the situation. Because if the attorney starts slapping down anything more than that, then their attorneys get involved and they say, stop everything. Don't go out there. Don't talk to them. Nothing. And we don't want that. All the parties involved, all of them are still moving forward on the solution of the project. So I don't want to jeopardize that. So I'm willing to say, let's get this done, and then we'll quibble about who owes what later. Yes. Oh wait, do you have a microphone? Sorry. Okay. So I'm sorry, I didn't see you. So we'll do one and then two. You okay?
Back to utilities for just a moment.
Yes.
I've noticed over the past several months with the dining venues closed in IP pretty much.
Yep.
There's still lights on 24 hours a day in there.
There's still people that work in there in the early mornings.
Well, but the lights are on all day and all night.
So I don't know if they're on all night, but we do have a shift that comes. We do have some prep work and some. We do
I'm
have
talking about in the dining areas, not in the kitchen.
Right, but I don't know if I can separate the. I'll look into it. I don't know if I can separate the dining areas from the
It might
kitchen.
be a little saving.
Yeah. So. Yes.
Yeah, with the air conditioning problem, is the manufacturer of the air conditioning also part of the solution?
The manufacturer inside the IP unit, they are no, they're not.
So they're not living up to their performance guarantee?
No, because they come out on the IP culinary building. The manufacturer comes out and says there's nothing wrong with the units. They're operating as intended. The airflow is not getting to where it needs to be. So that's a mechanical engineering issue. Okay. So on the IP buildings, like buildings B, C, D, and E, the manufacturer is involved. Okay. Because on that one, the units are shutting down with an error code, And they're like, wait a minute, that probably should not be happening. And so they've installed monitoring devices on them, and they're trying to track down why they shut down with these particular error codes. So they're saying when they're running, they're functioning as intended, and then they get an error code and they shut down. And what they're trying to do is the manufacturer is working with us on that because they're like, well, wait a minute. We understand that error code, but you should not be getting it as frequently as you do. Let's help you figure that out. So on the culinary building, they said, nope, nothing wrong with the unit. And on the D&E, they're saying, we don't think there's anything wrong with the unit. We do think there might be something possibly with the installation somewhere in the building, and we're going to help you track that down. But that's not an issue on the culinary building at all. So it's two separate issues. They feel like the same issue. One more way back, one there, and then up here.
I need to apologize to you.
Okay.
I didn't know what your position was for Royal Oaks, and I would not have asked you to fix the air conditioning in Thrive the other day when that cold air was coming down.
It's a great thing about Royal Oaks. Even if we don't know how to fix it, we know somebody that knows how to fix it. So go ahead. Yeah.
Have we thought about solar panels?
Have we thought about solar panels? Yes, we do, but the problem is the cost is too high because we don't get eligible. We're not eligible for a lot of these rebates. So a lot of the solar panels that you see in residential areas and in businesses, they're subsidized through tax credits and or rebates. But when you don't pay taxes, when you don't pay an income tax, we aren't subject to that. So we'd have to pay the full cost, which again, I'd like to see. Right now, if I paid the full cost of solar panels, it's like a 20-year return. It's too long. It needs to be a lot less than that. In other words, it would take me 20 years in savings to recoup what I put up there. There is a rebate program that the federal government has recently passed that would help nonprofits, but it takes it from about a 20-year to about a 17-year. That's still not enough. Really, what at this point, here's where solar would make sense for some instances. If we had, I'm just going to throw out an example. If we had a particular small project that was powered with electricity, and it was something outdoors, okay? It's possible to kind of maybe put up some mini solar panels that just power that one unique thing, because it's such a small little install, it makes sense. But when I have to put solar panels on top of the roof, on top of a roof, or on top of parking coverings, can it be done? Yes. But paying the full cost of that is a lot. For it to work, I need one of two things. I need either a serious commitment and some type of rebate from the electric company, and how they fund that is up to them, to say we want you to put in solar panels and we'll help you pay for a good portion of it. Or I need the technology to improve such that the cost doesn't have to come down, but I think it has to come down a little bit, that I can get the savings back. They need to run a lot more efficiently. So if the technology could improve along with the cost, yes, I would do it. There are other senior living communities in other states, such as Washington and Oregon, that do put a lot of solar panels in there, but they also have a lot of state assistance that help them do that. I'm not asking for state assistance. That's not my gig. It's not my thing. If APS said we would like to offer you something, I'd listen, absolutely. But for the most part, I'm not finding ways to help reduce the cost of that, because it has to be economically viable. I mean, that's why you have me here as a as a CFO. Is I want to make sure I make the best decision. I want to put solar panels in, but I also want it to be cost effective. Okay. Any other questions? We're about 15, 20 minutes over. All right. Well, I thank you for staying that long, and let me know if you have any further questions. Thank you.